Hi, I'm Jim Huling, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Execution Insights, where we explore the real human side of leadership and execution. Now, today's episode is about something that's quiet, but it's powerful. It's about something that shapes the way we lead and the way we live, and maybe even the way we respond when everything's on the line. And of course, I'm talking about standards. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about lofty values, graphically presented and framed on the wall, or even a perfectly worded mission statement. No, those things have their place, and I believe in those items. But today, I'm talking about the kind of standards that show up when the pressure hits, when no one's watching, and when doing the right thing even costs you something. So to begin, let me start with a story. One of my favorite coaching clients was a remarkable young executive I'll call Amira. She had been leading a high-performing team through a season of real growth. And I want to tell you, on her team, morale was strong and the results were steady. And I have to say, the future looked really, really bright. And it was about that time that Amira decided it was the right moment to take the team to the next level. So over the next several weeks, with some guidance from me, she defined their core values, the principles they wanted to guide every decision and every interaction. And she got the whole team involved. In fact, they met in small groups and they debated about individual words and they shared stories. And after a few weeks of thoughtful work, they were really proud to announce their list. And on their list were things that you and I would identify and very likely believe in. They had items like respect and integrity and collaboration and excellence. And when you read the list, it sounded perfect. And then came the storm. Isn't it amazing how often these items come together? A major customer left their firm, took their business somewhere else. And of course, with that loss of a customer, revenue dropped. And it seemed that layoffs were pretty likely on the table. In fact, almost overnight, the entire tone of Amira's team changed. The same people who'd spent weeks defining values began behaving in ways that violated every single one of them. I sat in on some of their meetings, and I want to tell you, it was tough. Blame replaced collaboration, and silence and withdrawn looks replaced honest interaction. And those posters that were now on the wall that were once such a source of pride? Well, it almost became a quiet reminder of just how far they had fallen. And when Amira and I spoke in our coaching sessions, she said to me with a lot of emotion, she said, "Jim, we worked so hard to define our values. And the first time they were tested, gosh, they just disappeared." And it was in that moment that I told her something that I myself had learned the hard way over decades of leading teams and coaching executives. And it was simply this: pressure doesn't change us. Pressure reveals us. And when the pressure comes, we usually don't rise to the lofty level of the values we ascribed. No. In fact, we fall to the lowest level of our standards. Now, that realization changed everything for Amira and her team because, values describe what we believe, but standards define how we live. Think of it this way. Values are the why behind our actions, right? But standards are the how that brings those beliefs to life. So when values are clear, but standards are vague, well, of course, teams drift. But when standards are specific and visible and practiced, the culture holds even in the midst of a storm. You see, a value says we believe in honesty, but a standard says we not only believe in honesty, we tell the truth even when it costs us something. That makes sense? Here's another example. A value says we believe in respect, but a standard says we speak to each other with kindness and respect, especially when we disagree. Here's one more example, just to bring this home. A value says we believe in excellence, but a standard says we always deliver our best work even when no one's watching. Do you see the difference? So values are incredibly important. They are the what in this equation, but standards are the how. And the gap between values and standards is actually what determines whether your culture is just words or whether it's a way of life. Now, years ago, I learned this lesson myself, and I think it's important that I relate this personal journey just to show you that I've had to learn the same lessons. At the time of this story, I was a CEO and I was navigating an acquisition. And I want to share with you that it was a season of relentless pressure. Gosh, it seemed like every day brought a choice between something that would protect my team and something that would help us hit the targets that somebody else had chosen. You know that pressure between those two things? Yeah. And I'll be honest, there were moments when I think we honestly compromised what we believed in order to do what we felt was required or necessary. And after one particularly brutal week, I realized something profound. When the pressure comes, we almost never rise to our intentions. We fall back to the lowest version of our standards. And I didn't want that to be the case for myself or for my team. So I started personally. I wrote my standards down. And at first I had just 3, and then I added 1 and 4 and then 6. And today I carry with me everywhere I go 6 simple statements. It's kind of a personal code of honor. And these statements aren't about perfection. They're just about direction. And I don't mind telling you, I revisit them almost every week. And sometimes when I do that little self-audit, they make me very proud of how I've lived in the past week. And other times, equal in number, it seems, they make me humble, right? But every time, regardless, they pull me back to the center. In fact, in a very real sense, those 6 values have become my personal survival kit. Now, if this idea resonates with you and you'd like to create some of your own personal values, just send me an email at jim@jimhuling.com. That's jim@jimhuling.com. And I'll gladly share the short guide I use with my coaching clients when they're trying to do this same exercise. In fact, it's the same one that helped leaders like Amira turn values into daily behaviors and to reestablish that theirs was a team that could be trusted. Okay, if you want to build standards, start personal. You can't lead what you haven't lived. So when you're doing this process, ask yourself, when the pressure comes, what do I want my behavior to reveal about me? And then write down 3 to 5 standards that define your best self in action. For example, I tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. That's one of mine. I do what I say I'll do. Or even, I lift others up, especially when I'm tired. Now, if you're on this one, take this one step just a little bit further. Write 3 values you hold most deeply, the ones that describe your best self, and then create the standards that turn those values into visible action. Don't make it complicated, by the way. Here's a clear example. Say your value is honesty. Well, a standard could be, I tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Do you see how the standard takes you further than the statement of just the value itself? Here's another example. Say that my value is commitment. Well, my standard could be, I do what I say I will do every time, right? Or one more example, if my value is empathy, my standard might be that I lift others up, especially when I'm tired. Now, if you're following along, write your own And write down not who you hope to be someday, but who you're determined to be today. Because when the pressure comes, well, those standards will be what hold you steady if they've been internalized and become part of who you are. In fact, once you've lived them personally, you can invite your team to do the same, but I urge you to lead by example. Because the most powerful standards aren't the ones that are imposed from the top down. They're not. They're the ones that are co-created from the bottom up. I remember well, Dr. Covey used to say, no involvement, no commitment. I'm not sure 4 truer words have ever been spoken. No involvement, no commitment. So when you're building these standards with your team, you want it to be something that everyone has a voice in. You know, it's easy to live your standards when things are going well, just like the story of a mirror. But it's when they're tested that they become real. For example, it's easy to say we treat people with respect until someone fails, right? Or it's easy to say we tell the truth until telling the truth really costs us something. So that's why compromising your standard, even once, just once, quietly teaches your team that it really isn't real. And that's the moment when culture begins to crack. So there are 3 practices that keep standards alive, and I want to just share them with you as we close this message today. Number 1, name them clearly. If you're going to build a set of standards, define the few standards that really describe you at your best, and keep them short and visible and alive. Because if you can't name them, guess what? You can't live them, right? Second, test them courageously. In fact, ask a trusted colleague to take a look at your team and to say, hey, what standards do you see in me and my team just by how we interact with you? Now, by the way, asking this question takes humility, but it's one of the most revealing questions you'll ever ask. And then last of all, as I've said a moment ago, live them weekly. End each week by doing what I do with this little audit. Ask yourself, did our actions reflect our standards this week? And you can do this as an entire team. But if you're going to do it with your team, remember, no guilt, just awareness and recommitment. Because awareness always precedes improvement. And to wrap this message up, I want to offer you this final thought. Someday, inevitably, the pressure will come. You know, the lights will go out, the numbers will dip. And in that moment, you and I won't rise to the occasion and will fall to our standards unless we build them now. So if you're listening to this message and it's moving to you, take this as an invitation to write them down, to share them, and to live them. Because in the end, our values may inspire us, but standards are the force that defines who we are. And it's when the storm hits, it's not what we said we believe that saves us. It's what we are willing to do. I'm Jim Huling. I want to thank you for being with us in this episode of Execution Insights, the podcast. I'll see you in the next episode.